So just to get an idea, how many of you are at executive management level or directly below? Good. You guys will enjoy this one. So one of the biggest challenges we've got, you know, my background, just, you can read it online or something. So life before a solution, right? When I started at the last company, we walked in there and their method of fixing the network was to go in and jiggle the supervisor and turn it back on. Because literally it would go down. Email was down every single day. There was no accountability for anything. Manufacturing lines down every day. So when I got in there, one of the first things I had to do was fix the problems, but then people were so used to just being able to blame IT. It was an easy target. To get budget for anything was almost impossible because everybody's impression of IT was they don't do anything. Nothing gets done. With no data, we couldn't get anything through. My predecessor to that lasted a whole 4 months. So we went through and had a selection process. I'd actually used the service desk at the previous company for, you know, just for regular old help desk stuff. While we were going through and looking at some of this, we knew we didn't have a lot of budget, but IT 360 was actually just in beta mode at that point. So we said, you know what, let's sign up, see what we can do with it. It fit everything that we needed. You know, we looked at stuff like Tivoli, obviously break out your checkbook for that one, and some of the free stuff, even like, you know, stuff that drops into SharePoint for just grabbing your tickets and logging information. And it gives you enough to get started, but it just wasn't enough to get anything pushed through in management to get the systems we needed. So as we started to do the implementation, we really needed to take a look at what's really important. You know, broke it down to email is required. Manufacturing is required. Manufacturing line goes down, the world's come to an end. I've had emails where people have sat there and they've said they've actually done analysis where they were waiting 22 minutes a shift for 42 stations, and it worked out to somewhere around 6,000 lost hours of manufacturing time, or lost minutes. So we want to avoid all those things. Phones is obviously kind of important. And then finding out what reports we can get out of it. The thing we got with some of that is, as we got all these things developed and as we started getting the information back out, there was a whole new set of information that we wanted to get. We started to see the value and all the other stuff. We got in and actually started monitoring key jobs running on the databases on the back end. You know, standard stored procedures for SQL scripts. We had typical backup jobs. We had our hosting company. We actually tied into the back end systems at our hosting provider so that we can monitor what's the network look like, what is the system resources. They put in a brand new M5000, nice, big, most powerful box we could ever possibly hope for. And we couldn't get it to perform. Didn't understand why. You know, turns out another server who was serving up some other stuff was running out of memory every day when China had come online. You know? Something about 3,000 users hitting it all at once. So these kinds of things are really all about just, you've got to identify what the big performance pieces are. As you go through, we actually got to the point where our management would start disciplining other people for trying to blame it on IT. So I put together a couple of just screenshots of some of the stuff that we put together. We had the manufacturing team called up and said they were down for some period of time. None of the stuff was ever reported to anybody in IT at any location. Now, the way that I was structured, I had to support 4,500 users, including the manufacturing floor. I had 22 people globally to do it. That includes the applications team. We pulled up the IT360 stuff, pulled up the server uptime reports. This is at the bottom here. We sent over to the CFO. The total downtime that we had in the entire month was like 3 hours for one of our servers that we were doing some major maintenance on. The whole thing was, we turned around and shoved it back on them. You can't sit there and blame IT all the time. And we were able to sit there and constantly we go through this. Every week we get an email, somebody saying a server's out, the SQL Server database is down. And it's usually some homegrown thing that some engineer wrote to support an ATE process. As we go through the budget, we're always trying to fight for more people. This is a chart of the average days to close. As you see this start to come up, around June last year, we brought on an additional factory line. In November, we brought up 2 more. Makes it pretty easy to justify hiring a couple people when you can tie this out. And now, when you get this trend going like this and you're not doing extra manufacturing, you might want to skip this chart. In the 3 years I was there, we grew from 1,200 to 4,500 people. They only added 1 IT guy, and we were still able to keep up with it. Our systems have an unprecedented amount of uptime. Downtime report for everything. When we go in, they told me in my budget process this year, we need you to cut it by 50%. Now, I was already running at roughly 1.5% of sales, which is pretty low. They wanted me to cut it down even lower than that, and then they told me, by the way, we're spending a bunch of that for some additional consulting we want to do. So I brought this chart into them and sent them a rec for a $50,000 backup unit. But out of this, you know, we had a lot of downtime, 2,000 hours of downtime. It sounds like, geez, man, that's a lot. How did you get that bad? Well, the reality is most of it was just standard maintenance we're doing on the servers. So they get old, you got to keep patching them. You got to keep changing out disk. You're constantly pulling backups down. All kinds of different things like that, and it adds up. I was actually even surprised by that number when I pulled it. These kinds of things, this is what management looks at. This is what saves you in the IT world. You know, the challenges that you run into when you put these kinds of systems in is there's so much data available to you. And just out of the box, pushing a couple buttons, you can create some stuff. We ended up going back and correcting perceptions. We force the use of help desk, period. If you don't use the service desk product, you are not getting service from my team. And they hate it. But it works. From that, we can see that 90% of our problems are PC and laptop issues, which is usually somebody walked off with some memory that used to be inside a machine. We put this on our intranet, show people. This is how many tickets we kill every year from our 25 guys. We create these dashboards. Now, you talked about dashboards. Dashboards out of the box, they're cool. But you've got to create a couple different levels because there are different ways that people look at it. We don't split things out into, you've got an apps, you've got a DB guy, you've got a PC guy, there's none of that. For us, it's either on or it's off. One guy gets it, one guy goes out. When you've got a problem that pops up in this system, you can pull up, you can acknowledge that you've seen the problem. That tech is now the guy that's in charge of it. He's the one that owns it. You can go back, you can tell whether it's an issue or not. You can break things down. This is actually one that was a real screenshot out of our live system. So that's why you actually see a whole bunch of red stuff. It's not all green and pretty. We had some critical stuff. We had a guy burn through a terabyte of disk space on a 9 terabyte SQL server in an hour. Then they sent an email out wondering why IT was so screwed up that we could let ourselves run out of disk space. Well, I pulled up and drilled into the server, and you can sit there and watch the disk space chart go across, and then we pull up and see what jobs are running. And that's where the value of the whole system being together comes in, because it's all just clicking through the links. From a management aspect, a guy like me, and I'm not a hardware guy, I go in and I can tell what's wrong with the hardware. I can tell I need to go make an investment. I need to get somebody working on something. This right here sold the product. I didn't have any problem getting budget for it. We looked at a bunch of different stuff. I threw it out there. The way we decided this one is I showed the CFO this, and he goes, yeah, we'll get that. And I said, well, you know, they do have some different tiers of price. No, I want this one. Because to him, he can see it. He can read it. So, you know, we go through all these things, and it's all a cyclical thing. Don't think that you can sit there and throw this product out there and it's just all going to work and everything's going to be pretty, because it's an ongoing thing. We break it down even to, we added some custom stuff, and you know, which is all just configurable user fields. We added some of those to track what the real resolution, you know. User confused, chair to keyboard interface. From that, we actually started scheduling all our trainings around what the users do, what the real cause of the problems were. So if we were getting problems with our Oracle backend, all that stuff, it was easy to go in and pull the statistics and change it up. Once you get it all set up right, this is the response that you get. Instead of people calling up saying IT's terrible, we start sending out notices to people who have their little ancillary systems off to the side saying, hey, your site's down. And that goes and gets kicked off to all their management. So now we're the ones that are able to initiate the change. We're able to identify that there's system down before the user does. And that's the real key. Because if you can do that, IT has become a value and not just a cost center. So, anybody got any questions? Globally, 22 people. In the US, we had 2 that supported 80 people. China, there was 16, and Taiwan, 4. 1 to 100, typically. But you know, the problem is they never allow you to count manufacturing personnel, because they say manufacturing personnel don't need any IT services. They don't even need a computer. Well, it's all fine and dandy, but the systems they're using tie in. You know, it ties into your WIP system, it ties into your ERP system, it ties into all their statistical tracking of everything that's going on. So to them, they may just be a guy that makes $2 an hour or whatever. To us, they're a user. And they are actually one of the biggest consumers. That's the real issue.
You mentioned ease of use on the implementation.
Mm-hmm.
What was the hardest part of your implementation?
Finding a server to put it on. Seriously, I didn't have any budget. We started it out on a laptop. It's not a joke. So we started it out on a laptop. Once we started to configure things, the biggest challenge we ran into is every time we call up the Cellco, because you can do SMS messaging out of it when a server goes down, just in case it's one of your primary lines or something like that. Well, one of the biggest issues we had is they kept sending us like USB cards like you'd literally use on a laptop. In reality, what you need is an external modem that just takes a SIM chip. But I'd say we tried to monitor too much. We really, really did. Just the default configuration out of the box allows you to do a lot of things, and you really need to kind of shut off all of that and just say, okay, we're going to start with this, and when we get this one dialed in, that's what we're going to use as kind of the model.
How intelligent did you find the system at stopping, let's say, related or cascaded dependencies? An object sits behind an object, your router goes down, and you've got 5 servers behind it, all of them try to alert? I mean, is there a lot of configuration involved in setting that scenario up?
No, honestly, I don't think that we ever really had an issue with that. I think basically, when you configure your alerts, it pretty much is going to pick the highest one, and it's going to go all the way down to the root cause as far as it can. If you've got 5 systems failing, you're going to get 5 alerts. If you've got one system failing because the link that goes to it fails, you can set up the alert like that.
Can I take that?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, okay. So here, there are 2 ways of doing it. One is you can monitor it at an infrastructure level, where you can look at each one of those components separately. Or if you'd like, you can group them in a business group or business service group, and it'll show up only as one alert, and you can drill down and see the various components that have contributed to that condition. And that's easily configurable.
And we did do the business groupings like that. We did it a little bit different than how you do it. What we did is we broke it down by site. And then from the site, then it was broken down into whether it was infrastructure, SQL, whatever.
Does that business grouping feature carry over to Op Manager, or is it just not?
It's basically in IT360, but it's a similar concept that's in Op Manager. Right. In fact, that's another powerful feature that Darren just mentioned, which is grouping based on sites. So if you've got multiple locations, you can actually look at site-specific metrics as well. So you can see business services across globally, or you can look at site A performing at a certain level, and how site B is doing, and things like that.
We use Service Desk Plus now, and it's testing App Manager, Op Manager, and some of the other components. Should we just shut down and stop testing IT360, or how do we do that?
ID360 could be an option. I would say, I'd love to discuss on what the requirements are, and that could be an option.
So we were testing it based on the functionality of App Manager individually and Op Manager individually. So we just testing and then just.
I can tell you right now, the only reason I stayed there as long as I did, because let me tell you, that was one of the most hostile environments I've ever seen against IT. It was very challenging. That product is the only reason I was able to stay there as long as I did, because we had enough information to focus the efforts to where we needed to use it.
I think he and I have the same question. Is IT360 basically Op Manager, App Manager, Service Desk, basically all the best everything put together?
That's right. Actually, we've taken most of the components from these products, and we've kind of put in extra features such as the SLA, the business service group that goes across all these components, and the integration with the service desk, log a ticket, things like that. So underlying components are still like App Manager and Op Manager and Service Desk, which are very mature products in their own rights. So it's not like we designed a product from ground, it's ground up, but using our own components, which are fairly mature.
You can create dashboards, say like an executive dashboard, an IT management dashboard.
Yes, absolutely.
Engineering.
Absolutely.
Admin.
Absolutely, absolutely. You can customize the dashboard. You can add whatever widgets you want. You can monitor whatever KPIs, whatever infrastructure components that you want. So.
And can you name those metrics, the different things,
Oh, yeah.
so that they make sense to each group, even though it's based on the data from a given single source?
In
Yeah.
this one here, you notice it says QCS Global View. I made that up. Simple. When you click on more, there's a whole bunch more, and you can break them out by what function your support people have, what function the business people have. It's all straightforward. And it really is easy to set up. Yeah, we had, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, about 8 locations that we were monitoring nonstop.
All the info flow back to a server?
All of this ran off of one box. We had the ability because we had the enterprise license.
And it doesn't affect your weighing traffic?
No, I mean, I figured it wasn't that big a deal considering the Chengdu was burning through 40 megabits. And me adding this to it wasn't going to hurt it any.
But you do have the option of setting up multiple probes, or that's like the tier 1 monitoring. You know, you can actually, I mean, ID360 comes in a few flavors, as I said earlier. And one is this 2-tiered architecture where you can have all the monitoring network facing function go to a central, go to a probe which is monitoring that location, which reports to a centralized, engine.
What's the licensing model on this product?
So it's basically in terms of, it's based on monitors. When I say monitors, it could be a network device, or it could be an application, it could be a technician. It depends on what you want. So it's very flexible. You can pick and choose. You have to basically come up with a configuration of what you want. And then,
Think about all our individual products, number of help desk technicians, how many assets, how many devices, how many interfaces, and there's a spreadsheet that comes out with a price.
right.
But it's
There-
very similar to our point.
Right. I mean, and one of the feedback that we've received is there are too many components there, but then the reason it's there because we would like to give the customer the option to buy whatever they want and not force this entire thing down their throat.
Is there a pricing tool to help us figure that out?
That's there with our sales team.
Yeah, it's,
And if you give the
Is that done out of
configuration,
that? So it's something you guys have, it's not something like we can go to the web
No.
and
No.
punch in X, Y, and Z and get a
No.
result?
No.
It's fairly complex in a sense of,
there's probably 8 to a dozen parameters that we look at, and we can interview you in 10 minutes and get that price point.
because a lot of times some of our customers have got the parameters wrong, and when they fill it up wrong, the pricing would not come out right.
I guess that's what I'm asking is there a tool to help us figure out what those elements are so we can pre-survey and then be able to have those answers for you instead of telling us?
Well, there are some descriptions that we could send over in terms of what those components are, but the right way that to do it is to engage in a discussion and see what's the kind of infrastructure that you have and what are those components that you're looking for.
I can tell you from experience, whatever the price number comes out to, okay, there's 2 things. One, get the ESX stuff because everybody's running VM, right? Should be. So there's some extra tools that come with the little add-on piece for that. And then the other thing is it's a steal.
just an observation about, you guys talked about how simple, the other products were and how you did have to involve the consultants. And this sort of feels like a step backwards almost, to where I would say that if you say it's complex and there's different aspects to it, maybe simplifying that in a way that it doesn't seem so, complex could be beneficial, from for the project or for understanding the product in that way.
Right. So the reason I think complex is not the right word, it's just that it is a larger product in terms of functionality. So there are so many moving parts, and if you look at it, it's like you're not just trying to understand an op manager, you're trying to understand 4 different products. So if you do it even individually for separate product, it would take you that much time.
It's an enterprise suite.
Yeah.
It's an enterprise suite product, so it's being
You're right.
priced as such instead of a single point, single line.
Exactly. I'm sorry, someone had a question over there which I was not able to take.
Earlier, I was just wondering, the difference, I think it's the professional version of the enterprise.
Okay.
How easy is it to take an existing functioning pro and step it into enterprise? Do you
Oh.
have to rebuild everything?
Not really, because the single server in a professional model can actually turn into a probe and send the data out to a central server if it's configured right. So it's a matter of licensing and configuring it. But you can have all the existing data, reused.
And if you're already using Service Desk Plus and you already have a ticket population, how easy is it to integrate that and just roll it, upgrade it LLM,
Seamlessly.
including customization?
I think so. So here's where I
saw
would,
a shaking
you know,
head
it depends on, it depends, before I say yes, I'd like to know what those customizations are.
There you go. That's a good answer. Okay.
So Darren, this is a manufacturing operation, so you likely would have a lot of manufacturing type related alerts, alarms, PLCs, those type of entities. But have you done anything with IT 360 to integrate those alerts, alarms?
To a certain extent. We have some availability to do that. We didn't want to get so far into it that we would all of a sudden be monitoring somebody's process. This is where I said in the beginning, right? You have to understand what your load is. Can you do all that stuff? Yeah, anything that kicks out an alert or alarm, you can capture it. You can generate a help desk ticket. You can automatically assign it to a technician. Doesn't even have to be in IT, because you can set that up. So that all can be done. It's just a matter of, do you really want to go there? Maybe, maybe not. You have to look at the value on it. Yeah.
In your situation, it's a separate.
Well, in my situation, it was more, we had so much network and so many ancillary systems off to the side that for us, we had to just go out and we'd ping these little ancillary things and these little processes, little scripts that we're running. We could tell you at any given point how long it took, or whether a backup job was successful, whether they did all this stuff. That 9 terabyte SQL Server database, that wasn't just an archive. That thing was, they were hitting that to pull serial numbers on every single product they ran through. The transactional amount on that was incredible. The only way that we could deal with it is we split off 8 terabytes of it onto another server and then create a logical view for them to hit for their lookup, so it hit both the one with the heavy transactions and the reference data. And so, and it was tracking all that. And then there was this whole archive process and all that. So we're tracking these archive jobs that are running in between shift changes so that we can make sure that we're keeping what they're hitting the hardest at the minimal amount. We use this for every piece of that, and even to get to the point to where we understood that that's what the problem was.
So when you say you do track, say backup and archive, but they use like certain software for the backup and archive, like the Symantec?
And we used, for backups, we used Backup Exec.
Have you looked into Symantec to get some of
I believe it was looking at logs on that, I'm not sure.
Yeah, we can actually monitor the logs or the scripts. You can actually write specific scripts that can pick out information from an existing application,
And for SQL Server, we were looking at the SQL jobs.
or you could execute database queries to do that as well. So, and that's basically part of that, managing those heterogeneous environments.
The other thing that's really cool about this, and I used to do this all the time, somebody would say, oh yeah, server performance is really slow. So I'd pop in and I'd look at the resources, because there's a nice resource view. I don't have a chart of that out. You can see it, talk to these guys. But there's a resource view that gives you a nice graphical representation of what's going on the server. Then you click into that and you can get the full view of what's going on the database side. So we'd sit there, I just don't see anything. Let me see what's running right this second. And it'll pull it up at the OS level and show you every job, every thread of those jobs that's running. And makes going through and debugging stuff really simple.
Will it consolidate alerts into a sort of a single problem ticket, so that
Yes.
one of our difficulties is we get so many alerts sometimes, especially if something's gone a bit awry or we have multiple problems, you end up getting it's white noise at that point, and it takes a while to consolidate that information. Will it group them and
Right.
put it single tickets together?
Right. So there are, actually, yeah, the answer is yes. And the way we do that is it's basically a two-stage process. One is you can actually configure the monitoring system to decide what kind of alerts will go from the monitoring system to the help desk. Second is you can set up business rules. I think a lot of people who are using Service Desk Plus already may have used the business rules to decide when a ticket comes in, how to treat it, what's the kind of alert you want to, what's the kind of ticket you want to open, what's the kind of fields you want to pre-populate. So using the combination of these two mechanisms, you can do that.
You support synthetic transactions?
Yes, we can monitor synthetic transactions.
You had to deploy any other solution that you find that IT365 covered?
Yeah, pretty much does the job across the board. You know, I'd say, you know, the network monitoring, depending on what systems you're using, as far as your switches and stuff. If you're using Cisco, it's plug and play. We were using MRV switches with WatchGuard as their firewalls. And that, you can get it working, but it's a little trickier. So you just kind of have to plan for it. But yeah, other than that, I can't think of anything that it didn't handle.
Right. If you've got devices that don't have a standard MIB, if you've got custom MIBs, you can actually build support into IT360. Pick and choose the OIDs that you want to monitor and build that into IT360 as well. Same thing that you can do with Op Manager actually.
Push virtual machine.
Yes, supports virtual machine, yes. We actually, we're doing a new release announcement and we're going to add, extend support for VMs for that. So it already supports ESX, ESXi, but we're also going to support Hyper-V. That's coming up in the new release. Yes.
I'm very new to the App Manager as well as the 360 product. How are you capturing the information from your switches, your router, the servers? Is this through SNMP or?
Right.
Okay.
From the network devices, it is SNMP primarily. For the Windows infrastructure, it's WMI.
Okay.
But then we can also pull information, say if it's an application server like WebLogic, you can do JMX. They have information in the form of mbeans. That's like a standard Java management extension. Apart from that, you have custom monitors. You can do Telnet SSH. Database queries for standard database. You can write the queries, plug them into IT360. So you can have these various collector mechanisms that can pull information and then kind of abstract it into a single, model it in in one particular way. Any other questions? I'll be here for the rest of the day, so you can catch me.